Welcome to Minnesota Crime Wave Presents, the program series that asks the questions you want answers to from crime authors of note. I'm Carl Brookins, mystery author. This is program number 18 in our series. With me in the studio are Ellen Hart, author of the Jane Lawless series, and William Kent Kruger, author of the Cork O'Connor series. A little later, we'll welcome Susan Runholt, whose young adult debut, The Third Lucretia, published by Viking Press, is doing well and is now available as an audiobook. First, let's shed a few words about young adult fiction in general. I pulled together a few references which will show up on the screen from time to time, and we've got some other things. You want to offer a definition of young adult, ma'am?
Oh, I can try. What I pulled off the internet, because I don't know that much about YA writing, was that young adult readers are generally considered age 12 through 18. Now,
Okay.
what I have learned is that there are picture books, and then there are middle grade fiction, and then or some books that are considered middle grade fiction, and then there are YA novels. But I think they all are written a little bit differently, and I love.
That strikes me as odd that they would include up to 18 years in
18,
YA,
yeah.
because by the time you're 18, you're reading Steinbeck and Tolstoy.
The thing
Really?
is, but I read YA novels,
Louis L'Amour.
more YA novels now than I think I've ever read before. I love Pete Hauptmann's novels, and I suppose that's what's gotten me involved.
Do you think that's because YA novels have changed
I
and
don't
now
know.
they're more contemporary? They address
say.
interesting issues in an edgy way.
Well, even for instance, like Kate DiCamillo, which is probably more middle grade because of Winn-Dixie, and I loved that book.
So where would you put Judy Blume?
I suppose
Somewhere else,
yeah.
clearly.
I mean, clearly
Within the YA.
Yeah.
But
okay.
even within the YA, there are probably categories or subgenres of
Well,
YA
you get it
into which.
elementary school, middle school, junior high, and then high school. So you got all those subdivisions within society. Before we go any further, though, there are two major awards that are very sought after. Recognitions and you want to talk about those two?
Just briefly. The John Newbery Award. It's awarded to authors of distinguished contribution to American literature for children, published in English in the United States during the preceding year. And then there is the Caldecott Medal, which is awarded annually it's called the Association for Library Services to Children, but it's a division of the American Library Association. And those are the two huge awards.
You win those and you're really...
You see the Caldecott or the Newbery Award
honor, right.
on the book cover, and it flies off the shelf.
I would assume that even being nominated would be a big plus for
Yeah.
them. Who else?
Now, have you guys written? I've done YA work. I've written short stories
and
for
ghost
Boys
stories
Live,
and
it's for me it was a very different experience than writing for adults.
Well, I have a question. When you're writing for a YA audience, what do you do in terms of language? I
don't use any four-letter words.
No, I know.
Okay. Well, you rarely use four-letter words anyway. So.
But I mean, what are you doing? Are you somehow creating a body of, in the text that is somewhat less, you're not using words that you think that they wouldn't understand, or concepts that you think they wouldn't understand?
The structural complexity
that's what she's going for.
Yeah,
Okay.
Is simplified greatly in the YA stories that I write. And I usually limit my language to words that I think probably the YA audience is going to know.
And so what is your YA audience? What age group?
Boys Life is usually 10 to 14, kind of that. 12 is kind of the audience that I shoot for in my own thinking. And when I'm writing a YA story for 12-year-olds, I think about what did I like to read when I was 12 years old? What were the stories I liked to hear? And I use that as my kind of my guiding light.
Mm-hmm.
Are there magazines other than Boys Life that you know about that are a market for this kind of thing?
For stories for boys, I don't know, but there's certainly a number of adolescent girl publications, 17, which always does a lot of short story stuff.
And I wanted to mention too that we have a lot of award-winning YA writers in this
In Minnesota?
yeah, in
Really?
this state. I just want to point out a few. Pete Hauptman, who we've already had on the program, he won the National Book Award for YA fiction. And
That's right. That was for for a YA book, wasn't it?
in Godless. And there are YA awards in science fiction writing, in mystery writing, in so there aren't just the Caldecott and the Newbery. There are
Other awards.
Yes.
Okay. So it's a big it's a big field in terms of publishers too, right? I mean, it isn't separate publishers. Is that right?
No, most publishing houses have a young adult,
Okay.
a younger reader department or track.
Scholastic is one that does a lot of.
There are some who
just
just
specific-
target Scholastic as one of them.
Yeah, but let me mention
All right.
Marion Dane Bauer, who is an ALA Newbery Honor winner, and Julie Schumacher, she's a wonderful YA writer. Her newest book is called Black Box. Kate DiCamillo,
Of course.
because of Winn-Dixie, which won the
Oh,
2001
right, of
Newbery.
course.
So
Gail of Despero also.
Yes.
Was it a Caldecott or was
I
it a
don't
Newbery?
know. That's the new one. That's
Yeah.
the newest one. Yeah. Michael Dahl, who writes the Finnegan's Wake mysteries. I think there are 5 or 6 in that series. And then Pete Hauptman and Mary Logue write
Together.
a YA mystery series, the
Series,
Bloodwater
okay.
series. And of course, our guest.
There's,
Tonight.
of course. We'll get to her in a few minutes.
Yes.
The bookstores. The one I think of immediately is the Red Balloon, which kind of specializes in children's and young adult books. Any others that you know of?
Well, I think Once Upon a Crime
Certainly has a
has
big
a
section.
section of YA mysteries for sure.
Would you say that I lost the question?
Can I
Well,
just mention
yeah.
something I thought was so interesting? There's a YA category now called the edgy YA, which I guess I sort of.
What does that mean?
Well, I think Pete Hauptman sort of writes edgy YA. It has to do with the topics that are discussed. For
Okay.
instance, they will talk about cutting, or
You mean cutting, skin cutting?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whoa.
Which happens, and formerly taboo subjects, and there are really no forbidden subjects in these
Anymore.
edgy anymore.
Not anymore.
No, it depends on how they're handled. And they're-
So if you had a child, let's say of 10, 12 years old, where would you go for some help in terms of
what
what
first
to get
thing
you
I
to
do
do?
is
Books.
consult a YA librarian.
Bingo.
Okay.
Yeah, those people are so on top of the genre of that group.
There's a wonderful list that I found online of a great list of YA mysteries. And so, all you would have to do is go to Google and type in YA mysteries. And the first thing that comes up is this really long list of the best. And I honestly haven't read a lot of the more contemporary YA mysteries. But I know there's some wonderful ones. out there.
I haven't either, but are you, as you say, you could go to your librarian, and
Absolutely.
I suspect we, as we all know, librarians rule the world. So it would. Okay. Any last thoughts before we move on to our YA guest?
I think the YA market is really huge, and we should consider writing some
Writing
YA
for that
mysteries.
market.
Well, that's
It's
a good
something
idea.
I never really have thought about. But the more I read, the more I think that.
I haven't either. Yeah.
Well, think about it, tapping into an audience young and then bringing them up into your adult novels later.
To read it.
From a mercenary standpoint, not a bad idea.
Not a bad. Also, from a reading standpoint, we talk about we want to get people to read, and there's all this concern about getting people to read, and I would think that good fiction would be a real way to do that. So maybe we should all write some good fiction for a younger audience.
I'd settle for just starting to write good fiction, period.
Well, you're doing a pretty good
We're all
job at it.
working on
Sonny.
that, yes.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with our guest, YA author Susan Runholtz.